Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas addresses the UN as he calls for peace in Gaza and rejects Hamas's role in governance. Denmark alerts NATO after coordinated drone attacks at its airports and considers triggering NATO Article 4. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 5 years in jail over a corruption case linked with the Gaddafi regime. Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has addressed the UN General Assembly virtually after being blocked from entering the US. He called for an end to the war in Gaza, urged humanitarian aid access, and thanked countries, including the UK and France, for recognizing Palestinian statehood. Abbas also stressed Palestinians will remain on their land whilst rejecting any future role for Hamas in Gaza. Take a listen to what he had to say.
On behalf of the Palestinian people, I would like to express our deep appreciation and gratitude to all the countries that have recently recognized the state of Palestine and those that intend to do so soon. We call on all those who have not yet recognized the state of Palestine to do so. What Israel is doing is not just an aggression, rather a war crime and a crime against humanity, documented and monitored. It will be recorded in history books and global conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of human tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Now, in an exclusive interview with Al Arabiya, French President Emmanuel Macron has said that Riyadh and Paris succeeded in rallying around 142 votes in support of the two-state solution. He attributed the success in securing historic recognitions of Palestinian statehood to the depth of ties with Saudi Arabia, which paved the way for the New York Declaration, which was announced following the high-level international conference on resolving the Palestinian issue. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The decision we have taken is indeed to launch an initiative with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in line with the mandate given to us by the United Nations, to build a plan that allows the Palestinian people and the Israeli people to live in peace and security. We all condemn the Hamas terrorist attack of October 7, its ignominy, and nothing can justify it. We all call for the release of all hostages still held by Hamas. We all demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian aid for civilians. But to achieve these results, a political path must be built to end this situation. That is what 142 countries did by voting for the New York Declaration. And so now, the next steps are as follows. We have this peace and security plan for everyone that we have built, supported by 142 states. We have now consulted with the United States of America, and this plan, which brings together a large majority of the international community, was developed jointly between Europeans and Arabs. We want to commit as much as possible. Yesterday, I had a long discussion with President Trump, and our team spoke extensively so that, following the meetings he held yesterday and all this work, we can now move forward with an initiative that could help free the hostages and stop the fighting. That is the first step. That is what we are all waiting for. And I hope it will happen in the coming hours, in the next few days, to free all the hostages, to stop the fighting in Gaza, and provide aid to the civilian population. Immediately after that begins the next phase of work, which is the second pillar of our plan, what we call the day after. And here, what we are proposing is a traditional administration in Gaza that will include members of the Palestinian Authority, with a process validated by the Israelis, to continue the work of training security forces and police, will be deployed in Gaza, work that many of us are already carrying out alongside the Palestinian Authority today. We have also proposed an international stabilization mission to which several countries in the region have already expressed their willingness to contribute. And indeed, at the podium, the Indonesian president also said this the other day.
The full exclusive interview will be streamed today at 1800 GMT. I'm now joined from Cairo by Mkhaimar Abu Sada, Associate Professor of Political Science at Azhar University in Gaza. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I wonder if I could just talk to you about some news lines that we've been getting through in the last few minutes. And they're from Donald Trump. He's currently holding a meeting in the Oval Office with the Turkish leader Erdogan. And Trump says we're close to getting some kind of deal done between Israel and Hamas. He also told reporters he had a great meeting with Middle East leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly on Tuesday. Should we be optimistic about Donald Trump's words that they are close to some sort of resolution?
Well, first of all, many thanks for hosting me. And that is definitely a very good question. We have been very optimistic many times in the past, and unfortunately, it did not work many times. But hopefully, this time, as the president have gathered 8 leaders from Arab and Islamic countries, main countries in the region, including Egypt, Turkey, Indonesia, Pakistan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. These are very influential countries. Hopefully that this time, I think it will work, especially that the military solution hasn't worked. Israel has been in a war against Gaza for almost 2 years now. On October 7th of next month, it will be 2 years. And Israel has so far failed to basically free the Israeli hostages by force and has failed to destroy and finish Hamas. So maybe this time there will be diplomatic and political efforts will try to put an end to the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza, and also will bring an end to the hostage ordeal who have been held by Hamas for the past 2 years.
And we also heard from the Palestinian leader addressing the UN earlier. We don't often hear from Mahmoud Abbas. What did you make of his speech today?
Good speech, but let me say that very much President Mahmoud Abbas has reiterated many things that he have said in the past. He has basically slammed Israel for its genocide, destruction, and starvation of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. He also slammed Israel for settler violence, which is being protected by the Israeli army in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In the meantime, he very much condemned and rejected the attack by Hamas carried out on October 7th of 2023. He very much said that doesn't represent the Palestinian people. Killing Israeli civilians and taking civilian hostages doesn't represent the Palestinian people, does not even represent Palestinian struggle for independence and statehood. And he also reiterated the position that he has basically said recently, that Hamas will have no role to play in the Gaza Strip in the day after this war, meaning that the Palestinian Authority, with the support of the Arab countries and the international community, will assume responsibility over the Gaza Strip with no role to Hamas or even the other Palestinian factions. And he did also call for the disarmament of Hamas and the other Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip, and called for a Palestinian demilitarized state in the future, meaning that the Palestinians do not need a state with weapons, a state with arms, that the Palestinian state will have to be a peaceful state with its neighbors.
So it's quite interesting. You have outlined the points that Mahmoud Abbas did make today. He made 9 points to the UN, which you say is nothing new. We've heard it all before, which included the need for an immediate and permanent end to the war in Gaza, Hamas laying down its arms. Is this fantasy thinking? Will this ever come to light?
Well, it's a very good question again. Yes, President Abbas laid out 9 points, starting from an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire to the release of Israeli hostages, the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, disarmament of Hamas, and also assuming power of the Gaza Strip. Now, that all depends on the action and behavior of the Israeli government. And that's what also President Trump has basically said this evening in his meeting with Turkish President Erdogan, in which he said that he is going to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. And the plan, the 21-point plan, which was presented to the Arab and Islamic leaders by Trump, will be basically presented to Netanyahu. Whether Netanyahu is going to accept that or not, it will be seen. But I think that Netanyahu is going to find it difficult to reject those 21 points. Maybe he might try to amend them. He might try to revise some of them. But I think with the recognition of Palestinian statehood by many major European countries recently, by UK, France, Belgium, Australia, Portugal, many other countries, I think Israel is becoming more and more isolated, and I don't think that Netanyahu is in a position to reject those items presented by Abbas or presented by President Donald Trump. I think we might go into the direction of putting an end to this war. But again, it all depends on Netanyahu and the security of his cabinet. Netanyahu has acted in this way over the past 2 years, for fearing that his cabinet will fall down and that he will have to face investigations and criminal charges in Israel. So hopefully that President Trump will put enough pressure on Netanyahu to bring about an end to this war and release of the Israeli hostages.
And just quickly, Doctor, before I let you go, America blocked Mahmoud Abbas's visa, so he wasn't actually able to be there in person. And the US has stood by Israel's side throughout the Gaza war. Were you surprised that he didn't criticize Donald Trump at all?
Well, we all know that the U.S. is a major superpower, and President Mahmoud Abbas does not want to antagonize President Donald Trump. We all know how President Trump has dealt with his other leaders, whether it's Zelensky in the White House or even former President Joe Biden, which has taken a lot of critics by President Donald Trump. So I think President Mahmoud Abbas did not want to pick a fight with President Trump. He did not even mention that his visa was rejected. He basically, President Abbas, instead of focusing on antagonizing President Trump, he put most of his anger against Israeli Prime Minister and Israeli aggression or Israeli policies against the Palestinians. I think, in my opinion, that was a smart move by President Mahmoud Abbas. He still left the door open for future contacts or future talks between the Palestinian leadership and the American presidency. And that's why I think he did not make any critic or any comments about the denial of his visa to the U.S.
Mkhaimar Abu Sada, it was brilliant to have your insights on the show. Thank you for your time. For more on this, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by former Israeli politician, Dr. Shuki Friedman. Thank you so much, Shuki, for joining us. So we were just speaking a little bit earlier on the show about the speech we heard from the Palestinian leader and also what he had to say. And you know, he delivered a speech that condemned Hamas and the Israeli government, Hamas for the October the 7th attack and Israel for carrying out genocidal actions inside of Gaza. What exactly did you make of that speech?
I think that this speech is actually addressing the Palestinians and the rest of the world, but it's missing one important point, which is being missed by other states as well while declaring a Palestinian state. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians should be resolved by the Israelis and the Palestinians. Now, if we take back the history of this conflict and the history of the Oslo agreements and the 3 decades passed since then, we can see that both sides made mistakes, but I think up until today it's clear that if there be no direct negotiation between Israel and Palestinians, maybe it would be Abbas or other Palestinian leaders, without Hamas playing any role in the Palestinian government, there's no chance for a peace, no matter how many states will recognize this actually unexisted Palestinian state.
But then if we did listen to Abbas's speech, he made that very clear. He did say Hamas will play no role in the governance of the Palestinian state. But he also set out 9 conditions that he wanted to be reached, which included full withdrawal of Israeli troops from within Gaza. Is Israel prepared to lay down its arms and have diplomatic talks and to stop fighting?
In my perspective, in certain point, Israel should be ready to go to a diplomatic solution. There will not be a long-term weapon or armed solution to the Gaza Strip. I don't see Israeli forces keep the presence in Gaza Strip for long term. And the only reason that justifying Israeli presence and fighting in Gaza is Hamas' presence and its willingness to release the hostages for already 2 years. And you see, it's really quite simple. If Hamas would disarm itself and release the hostages, Israel will be, I think, quite an immediate retreat from the majority of the territories it took through the war in Gaza and start to negotiate with the power that takes place of Hamas in Gaza to settle a long-term solution that will enable Israelis and Palestinians to prosper in Gaza and along the border between Israel and Gaza. So I think it's the hands of the Hamas terror organization, it's the hands of the Palestinian Authority, and it's in the hands of other countries that can push Hamas to choose this solution and actually enable Israel and Palestinians live side by side and prosper side by side for long years.
So, Shuki, a little bit earlier, I was speaking to Dr. Mkhaimar, and he did say to me that really, for Israel, by force, they have tried to eradicate Hamas. By force, they have tried to get back the hostages. 65,000 people inside Gaza are dead due to what's been happening in the last 2.5 years. So, because Israel has failed on the military side, are they prepared now to see that failure and maybe think to themselves, we need to come to some sort of deal when it comes to speaking to Donald Trump? We know Netanyahu will be meeting him on Monday. Do you think Netanyahu is ready to accept the terms and conditions of this 21-point plan?
I think the one thing that completely agreed between Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas and others is that Hamas should not be part of the solution.
Sorry to interrupt you. We know Hamas shouldn't be involved. You always speak to me about Hamas. We know Hamas shouldn't be involved. I want to know what Israel is going to do.
So far, Hamas never agreed to disarm and release the hostages. Now, let's try to understand what will bring him to this point. If it will be international pressure, great. It will be the other means, okay, that might be no other alternative than to continue and to push Hamas over the land of Gaza. But in my perspective, it really depends on the question of who will take over the Gaza the day after. And unfortunately, I think the Palestinian Authority is currently too weak to take over. You can see what happened in the West Bank now. There are refugees camps in Jenin, in Abalus, in other places where Hamas is gaining more and more power and weaponizing itself against the Palestinian Authority. So it's really naive to assess that the Palestinian Authority will be the solution to disarm Hamas. So it should be a major force that will come outside the Strip, maybe by Arab countries, maybe by others, that will force Hamas to give up or to disarm and enable the Palestinians within the Gaza Strip to stop their suffer, enable Israel to retreat from Gaza Strip, and then go forward to a solution that will be sustainable for the sake of both sides.
So I just want to ask you a little bit about today. On his way to New York, Benjamin Netanyahu's plane avoided European airspace. In the case of an emergency landing, he could be arrested under warrants issued by the ICC. Is Israel feeling increasingly isolated from its Western allies? Because we did see this week at the UN General Assembly that many Western allies are now backing a Palestinian statehood. And now we see Benjamin Netanyahu can't fly over Europe. It's not a good look.
First of all, you're completely right. I mean, don't know the reason why Netanyahu went through this route, but it definitely clears that image of Israel and its set toward the European countries and other allies is less strong than it used to be before, and it is a concern for Israelis and for Israel, and I assume for Netanyahu as well. And the fact that many leaders trying and criticizing Israel and going against its policies and declaring Palestinian state definitely a result of this quite crisis situation between Israel and some of its allies. But you have also to remember that both sides, I think Israelis and Palestinians and European states, seek to get to a solution. And if we want to get to a solution, a clash with Israeli government would not promote this solution because it pushes the government to the corner. I think the right way, the right path to get to a solution in Gaza and then to get to a long-term solution between Israel and Palestinians, which we seek for decades already, is to find a way to negotiate directly Israel and Palestinians, and maybe put on the table or an engagement other countries that can support this effort. But I think that the current policy of some of the European governments are counterproductive to seek or to get this solution, because to clash with one side and to support the other side would not promote, even if major pressure put on Israel, necessarily the right solution, a long-term sustainable solution.
Dr. Shuki Friedman, thank you so much for your time. Denmark has alerted NATO after coordinated drone attacks at its airport and reportedly considering triggering NATO Article 4. Russia has denied involvement in the incidences, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says he's working with Denmark to improve its safety and also its security. For more on this, I'm joined by Robert Fox, defense editor for the Evening Standard. Robert, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Denmark has alerted NATO and the European Union after coordinated drone attacks at its airport. Why have they alerted both organizations?
Well, it's been going on for a long time. This week alone, in the space of 48 hours, there have been 2 separate waves of incursions. And what's so interesting, which shows that this does look like a coordinated disruption campaign, is that this time they aimed at the smaller airports, not Copenhagen itself, but in the north, and 3 or 4 small airports by just flying drones in at night, green lights. You disrupt traffic. You just make sure that that normal traffic and communication flows cannot continue. Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister, has been very firm about it, and she's been very clever, I would say, in what the statement that she's made about it. She said this is a coordinated, professional effort, not named the suspect, indicating, though, of course, that they do suspect that Russia is somewhere deeply behind this, and asking for Article 4. And it's very interesting that Article 4 comes up, because Article 4 is where the NATO countries of Europe, on a bilateral or multilateral basis, below Article 5, which involves the whole alliance, must get together and deal with the defence. And dealing with the defence has got to be done actually with the EU as well. It's a warning note to the EU that this is going on, and you've got to give more muscle, more clear thought, more realism to your foreign and security policy.
And Robert, Russia has said it's not involved, but you just talked to me about Mette Frederiksen's speech. But is Europe on high alert after several NATO members have reported airspace violations by Russia? And I feel like we're seeing a pattern of it. There seems to be more happening lately.
The more lately, you're absolutely right. That is absolutely the key phrase. This has been going on for a long time. There have been drifts of drones into Romanian as well as Polish airspace. And then we had between 19 and 23 drones on the 9th of September into Polish airspace. And then Belarus gets up and said, oh, we think they're on the way, and it may be a bit of an accident, maybe an overshoot for the Zapad. Belarus Russian military exercise, sorry, a bit of a mouthful that, and but then we had a drone drifting over Romania within a day of that happening, and the Romanians were very interesting about it because they wanted to drive the drone away. They didn't want to knock down the drones, which the response force over Poland felt constrained to do. And then rather more sinister and more direct was the incursion of 3 MiG-31s with their highly sophisticated aircraft over Estonian airspace, largely airspace over the sea. But what happened there was that the aircraft switched off their transponders. They didn't respond to civilian air traffic control. Therefore, that shows that they were on a stealth mission. They claimed that they were trying to reinforce the Russian presence in Kaliningrad, the enclave between Poland and Belarus and, of course, Lithuania. And that's going to be the key place. We're seeing pressure points all along the line, and Russia appears to be ramping up the pressure. The denial is absolutely to be taken because it's an information war as much as an incursion and a probing and a testing disruption war for them. And but it is a kind of conflict.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry. I was just going to say earlier this week, President Donald Trump said NATO countries should shoot down Russian planes if they enter the airspace. Now, what are the consequences if this action is actually taken?
By the way, can I just say, I think NATO allies do not take that as an order for Donald Trump. And one of the conspicuous things, particularly with his performance at the UN, at the General Assembly, is that Trump is almost discounted in terms of practical preparation for this. No doubt the American forces, there are absolutely no doubt that the American forces are reinforcing and they are preparing, as they should, all military forces for the worst if it should happen. They've been sending bombers over to the UK to reinforce, and they have been warning about obviously the signals and information war, which is where American contributions, particularly in communications and intelligence, are absolutely vital. But do put Trump to one side if you can with this, particularly his rhetoric, because we now have to guess at what Putin's command and what his soldiers are really up to. And then, of course, we have to come back to Ukraine. The Ukraine conflict is coming coming to what's known as a culminating point. It's coming to a tipping point because it cannot go on like this, because the Russian forces are showing it cannot go on like this, particularly as the Ukrainians, rather surprisingly, have more tricks up their sleeves than had been expected. They're not losing totally on the battlefield in the way that even the conservative American narrative would have us, and they are capable of fighting a depth battle, and we don't really know the consequences of that. I spell that out. They're hitting pipelines, they're hitting vital communication centers, they're hitting ammunition dumps, and they're getting deep, deep into Russia. And one suspects from this side, looking at it very carefully, they've got really good intermediate missiles working. They boasted about their Flamingo missile range of 2,000 kilometers, and they do seem to be striking deep. And as the winter comes on, Russia could be facing a major resource, but above all, fuel and possibly even food distribution crisis.
Absolutely fascinating to speak to you, Robert Fox. I hope that we do have you on the show again, defense editor for the Evening Standard. Thank you for your time. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Travis Decker, who was accused of killing his 3 daughters, has been declared dead by US Marshals. A months-long manhunt was underway for him after he disappeared in May. Local law enforcement are waiting on DNA results to confirm that the human remains found in Washington are indeed his. Over 1,000 children have fallen ill after consuming free school lunches in Indonesia. The mass poisoning is linked to the Indonesian president's $1 billion meal program. It follows a string of other similar incidents, prompting calls from NGOs to suspend the program. The White House is asking federal agencies to prepare for layoffs if the U.S. Congress fails to avert a government shutdown next week. That's according to a memo obtained by U.S. media outlets. The memo also warns of permanent firings, especially those projects not consistent with the president's priorities. This comes after Trump refused to meet Democrats who are seeking health care funding as part of negotiations. Now, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 5 years in jail over a criminal conspiracy tied to millions of euros in illicit funds from late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The Paris court acquitted him of other charges, including illegal campaign financing. Sarkozy insisted the case is politically motivated. The ruling marks the first time a former French president could indeed face jail time. For more on this, I'm joined from Paris by our correspondent, Ross Cullen. Ross, I do apologise, slightly losing my voice here. Any appeal, Nicolas Sarkozy will go to jail.
Yeah, Leigh-Ann, I can do the talking if that helps. A historic day here in France. 5 years in prison for the former president after that conviction a little bit earlier on here in the French capital for criminal conspiracy, acquitted of a couple of other charges, as you say. But the judge highlighted that even if there were to be an appeal, the fact that these take so many months in France, that from the 13th of October, that's the earliest, that he could be going to jail. He will be spending time behind bars. Nicolas Sarkozy saying that if that is the case, he will sleep in his prison cell with his head held high. He lashed out at what he said was a scandal, what he said was injustice. He said that this decision taken in Paris today would have extreme consequences for the French rule of law. He did say that he would be fighting until his dying breath to prove his complete innocence. So this is all tied to the illicit campaign financing allegations that Nicolas Sarkozy received millions of dollars in cash from the Libyan regime of the late dictator Muammar Gaddafi in return for helping Colonel Gaddafi rehabilitate his image on the world stage after many years as a pariah.
And Ross, we must also understand this is not the first legal battle Sarkozy has faced since he did leave office. Last year, he was ordered to wear an electronic tag. What more can you tell us about his history with the law?
Well, Leigh-Ann, it's been a litany of legal troubles for the French president since he left office in 2012. There was the conviction for trying to bribe a judge and for influence peddling, and that saw him wearing an electronic tag for 3 months. Also, another conviction for signing off on fake bills to try to hide illicit campaign overspending on his failed re-election bid in 2012. There's an appeal underway from Mr. Sarkozy's legal team against that conviction. So he has faced these two previous convictions, but certainly this is the most serious of all. Colonel Gaddafi did say that he actually had approved the sending of cash payments to Nicolas Sarkozy. Then there was another man who gave testimony saying that he had dropped off the suitcases of cash to Mr. Sarkozy's team, but then he retracted his testimony. That man was found dead in Lebanon last week. So there's been a lot of political intrigue with this story, but the French courts could not actually find any evidence that Nicolas Sarkozy had received those alleged cash payments. Hence, he was exonerated on some of the charges, but as you say, found guilty on criminal conspiracy, which will see him serve 5 years behind bars.
And despite his legal battles, Sarkozy remains an influential figure on the French political stage and the scene, which is quite fascinating. Tell us more about his influence in politics still carries on.
Well, we have to look at some of the reactions from politicians across the political spectrum today, Leigh-Ann. If you look at Ségolène Royal, now she stood against Nicolas Sarkozy in 2007. She lost to Mr. Sarkozy, but she said it's a sad day when their former president is put behind bars. Marine Le Pen, who's from even further right than Nicolas Sarkozy, said that while she didn't agree with his politics, she was worried by the fact that this justice had been meted out immediately. And we did also see Nicolas Sarkozy's own party, the Conservatives, the Republicans, also decrying the judgment and being upset about the sentence that was handed out. Emmanuel Macron, the current president, has been often receiving Nicolas Sarkozy for advice at the Élysée Palace throughout his 2 terms in office. Mr. Sarkozy brought a book out earlier this year, so he is seen as someone who is still influential, particularly on the right in French politics. He's one of only 2 living former presidents in France, along with Francois Hollande, and so both of those men have actually been to see Emmanuel Macron on many occasions to give their counsel and their advice.
Ross Cullen, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you letting me recover. Let's take a look at the top business news now. Britain's competition regulator has ordered Ticketmaster to be more transparent about ticket prices. The move comes after fans raised complaints over ticket sales for the summer tour of the band Oasis. An investigation found that Ticketmaster sold some platinum tickets at more than double the price of standard ones without clearly explaining the offers. An Indian court has dismissed a case filed by Elon Musk's X against a government portal, which the platform said was being used to censor content. This marks the second time in just over 2 years that X has lost a challenge to India's content blocking rules. The platform is estimated to have around 25 million users in India. And a reminder of our top stories. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas addresses the UN as he calls for peace in Gaza and rejects Hamas's role in governance. Denmark alerts NATO after coordinated drone attacks at its airport and considers triggering NATO Article 4. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 5 years in jail over a corruption case linked with the Gaddafi regime. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. G&T with Tom Burgess-Watson will be coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.